Hello again, ladies and gents. Just to interject for the next half hour or so, for as we move into the panel discussion and really go into what's happening in the property and construction industry. The purpose of this discussion is to hear about the different from different areas within the sectors. We've got attending today people up and down the supply chain, so it's to keep everyone better informed. You can inform those around you. So there may be some things that you take away from today that our speakers are experiencing that you can use and in your own line of work. So just a couple of points before I introduce the guys up onto the screen. With the chat box, please, if we can try and keep that to more discussion-based conversations rather than self-promotion and that kind of thing. We want to hear about your experiences within the industry and what you're seeing as well, and feel free to add to the points that the guys make. You'll see just along from the chat there is a Q&A area. If you have any questions that you'd like me to pose to the speakers throughout the discussion, feel free to add them in. There will be some time at the end where I can go through them, or if they're applicable to what we're talking about, I can pull it up. Yes, we want to make it a very much discussion based. So do contribute within the chat, do contribute within the Q&A area. We're really going to focus on sort of what are the short and long-term challenges that each of the guys are facing, new ways of working, I hate the phrase now, I've heard it so much, but what is the new normal going to look like for these guys, but also where are their opportunities and what trends are they starting to see emerging. So I will just invite everyone up onto the screen. So we'll start with Sarah there. Just got to search for them here. Mark, I'll invite Mark. And Charles lastly. Hi, Sarah.
Hiya.
How are you? You okay?
Yeah, good, thank you.
Good. Mark's in and just waiting for Charles. How are you, Mark? You okay?
Yes, fine, thank you. All good.
And Charles. Hi, Charles.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. Great. You're coming through loud and clear. And I want to try and get straight into it, really. I mentioned earlier that, firstly, Charles, as Managing Director of McConville Surveying, you're really looking at the building surveying, quantity surveying and project management aspect of things. Sarah from Hawes Building, it's really around the construction element. And Mark, as a partner of Graves, Son and Pilcher, looking around the commercial property real estate side of things. These guys are based down in Sussex, but we've got people within the meetup from across the southeast, from London, Hampshire, Surrey, Berkshire. So I'm sure a lot of what you'll talk about is being seen across the board. So we'll start off, and we'll come to you first, Charles, and I'll pose the same question to all of you. But Charles, in your line of work, what are you seeing? What are really the short and long-term challenges that you're having to navigate right now?
Good morning. Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation to join you this morning. I think the challenges we're facing are both sort of internal within the organisation and external as with the clients we work with. So we do a lot of surveying with clients in the education sector. We work with developers, people like Shore and Port Authority. We work in the care sector, and we have quite a wide and diverse client base, very deliberately, because that spread the risk when harder times hit us. But the very noticeable thing we've found in the sectors we work in is that clients in the education sector rely on income from foreign students are very understandably extremely cautious at the moment, because they've no idea whether foreign students are going to come back to the UK in September, or indeed whether they can fly, whether there'll be any flights. So some of the universities and schools in the independent sector are holding back, and one project we've got with one independent school, they've actually stopped it halfway through while they just wait and see what the future holds. In the wider market, and Sarah might touch on this a bit as well, we are starting to see, as sites reopen, material shortages. So things like plasterboard, for example, contractors are telling us it's very hard to come by because a lot of these production facilities were closed during the lockdown and are now trying to catch up on a backlog of orders. So we are seeing a bit of sort of a V in terms of the recovery immediately as we try and get projects that are on moving again. And part of the short-term challenge is trying to do a bit of risk management around programs and what may influence completion dates and that kind of thing. And as I say, it's a lot of it around availability of materials and indeed subcontractors, because there are one or two subcontractors, sadly, who were teetering on the brink of it before COVID-19, and nobody's quite sure whether some of those will survive in the longer term. So that's the sort of short-term challenges. Longer term, I think we are concerned about economic confidence, because a lot of what we do is private sector related, and the private sector needs confidence in the longer term economic picture. We're still getting a few, a decent leveling of inquiries coming through. Quite how many of those will turn into convert to live projects is unknown. So we're having to think about the markets we're working in, those sorts of things, because while we're okay at the moment, in 6 months' time, unless we do something now, we could be seeing or facing a slightly different picture.
Yeah.
So the longer term, I think with social distancing on construction sites, and Sarah will talk more about that, I'm sure, and safe systems of work. We're working out how we're going to return to the office, because we're all currently still working at home. And we will be looking, I'm sure, as an industry, a lot more at modern methods of construction and fabrication of construction and buildings, because I think the days are gone of hundreds of people tripping over each other on building sites. And where we can prefabricate, it's not easy prefabrication, because it means everything will be the same. And we all know that no buildings are ever quite the same, because they have to fit on different size sites. And indeed, we have lots of architects who very understandably and quite rightly want to put their mark on a building. So we never have two buildings quite the same. But that doesn't mean we can't review and consider how we might do things more efficiently and better in the long run. So I think those are some of the challenges we're seeing. Yeah,
well, you've preempted a couple of my questions there, Charles, but we'll come back to it. Mark, I know you've made it into the office today. There's a little bit of background noise where you're coming from, with people coming and going. So if you're able to, when perhaps Charles or Sarah and I are speaking, to pop your mic off, we won't pick up that background noise then, just so we can pick it out. I'll come to Sarah next. And Sarah, Charles sort of alluded to it there. Within the construction industry yourself, what's something that you're really seeing as a challenge right now?
Right now is workload. We were fortunate when lockdown was announced that we were working at the Eastbourne Hospital, doing about a £500,000 project there for them, and they got quite upset when we said we're going to lock down, and then they said no, we want you to carry on. So we've carried on with that. It's gone well, but we finished it. We'd also successfully won a project for a local charity in Eastbourne to do again a large care home refurb, but they were relying on the sale of a property to fund the money, and literally I think they were days away from signing the contract, so that all went on hold. We're possibly now negotiating work there, doing it in stages so that they can fund a bit, we'll stop, they'll fund a bit, so that hopefully is going to go ahead now. We've had problems with sourcing materials, as Charles said. The biggest one didn't impact us too much was plaster, because a lot of what we were doing was subcontractors, mechanical, electrical, roofing. The one we've heard about this week is cement. they've now said, Travis Perkins have now told us that we need to pre-allocate if we want anything. I think they're going to go down from 8 lorries a day to 8 lorries a week. So that's going to be a big one for everybody. We've furloughed the majority of our staff. So a lot of the jobs that we had priced were domestic jobs. So clients are now unsure whether they'll have the money because they're either furloughed or uncertain of their jobs to then pay for it, and also whether they're happy for us to work in their property. So that's another one. And so yeah, so we're just about on the cusp of starting the consultation period with some guys, because we've ridden the hard bit, but it's now the bit where we've got to try and sustain ourselves, and we just haven't got the workload confirmed. So yeah,
no, it's absolutely great. Thanks, Sarah. And we'll come to Mark, and Mark, just remind you to unmute yourself. But Mark, a lot is being said in the commercial property, the commercial real estate world about what that will look like, and even there's a question already in the Q&A from James about how that will suffer. We'll come to that later. But in your role, in your line of work, what's really a short-term challenge that you're having to navigate right now?
Yeah, thank you, Bradley. From a Gravesend and Pilcher's point of view, the short-term goal was ensuring that we had all the staff at the end of this process that we had at the very, very beginning. And that we, like Sarah, we have used the furlough scheme for part of the staff. And we were lucky in some ways in that we had a scare within the office with a member of staff showing signs of COVID in a particular department. So we had to shut that department down earlier than the actual lockdown of the 23rd of March, which made us think. And so we were geared up and ready for when we had to work from home. Luckily, that member of staff tested negative, so that was good. So we've managed to carry on the business as usual, working from home. Gravesend and Pilcher itself has property management, both residential and commercial, as well as agency. And on my side is the professional work where we do lease renewal, rent review and valuation work. My particular work more or less sort of dropped off the cliff on the 24th of March because you can't go waltzing in and demanding rent reviews during the COVID period where they fall within that period. Similarly, lease renewals, some tenants were happy and wanted to talk, but obviously from a rental point of view, it's better just to have them holding over and see what happens. So they're the sort of short term goals there to try and come over. Then, of course, we have the issue with our clients, and our clients are private clients as well as pension funds, etc., where we manage property and rent collections. And on the whole, everyone has been very sensible and very flexible. And tenants also, I have to say, after the initial sort of panic, oh my goodness, you know, for example, in a restaurant or a cafe, what on earth am I going to do? There is no income coming in at all, have been very entrepreneurial, as I'm sure we've all seen, and we may well have used some of the services online where they've turned into vegetable deliveries and meat deliveries and baking cakes and all sorts of things, suddenly delivering worldwide. And that has been really good to see that businesses, I think one of the plus sides to come out, if we look on the positive side of this, is that businesses have looked, I think, at themselves and possibly, we're all guilty of it. We run a business, that business is running. We don't have necessarily the time to really sit back and delve and go deep into the business and whatever else we could look at and other areas we could move into. And the positive that has come out of this is that businesses have had that opportunity to do that. And there are going to be some businesses that will not come back the same way that they left. They'll come back in a stronger position and in different markets and different sectors, different way of working. We found, and I think we mentioned this previously, that if someone had said to you on the 1st of January, you could move your whole business to every single member of staff working from home and still be as productive and still survive. Obviously, certain businesses can't, I fully appreciate that. But certainly from an office base, I think you would have said, no, we can't do that. No, you would be very against doing that, and it would be against your human nature to do that. You wouldn't trust the staff. You wouldn't trust the IT. And I think that's shown that actually you can. And things like today, that you can have a networking event where you can move virtually around from table to table. I've been on webinars and seminars that the RICS have run to keep the CPD up. Work perfectly okay over this sort of platform. Okay, you're not seeing literally face-to-face, but you're saving the travel up to London or wherever it may be, and actually you're becoming more efficient. But from a tenant's point of view and a landlord relationship, that will change. Leases will change. And we're already seeing solicitors, quite rightly, on behalf of their clients, looking to put clauses in that should another such outbreak of a virus happen, then rents and outgoings are frozen for a period of time, which obviously then affects landlords, and they'll have to try and get insurance to cover that, like they cover their other aspects. Whether that will be forthcoming and at what cost, I don't know. And I think we also need to remember that it's not just the big corporates that are landlords out there. We also have small family trusts, individual people that use that and have that as their sole source of income. They may have inherited the property. So I think whilst quite rightly there has been a lot of help for tenants, and it needed to be, otherwise businesses would die and the high street would die, I think it also needs just to bear in mind that there needs a little bit more help in certain circumstances in areas for the landlords as well.
Yeah, I read an interesting report yesterday, as yesterday was what they call quarter day, that they reckon that only 10% of rent will be paid, and that was based across studies in the whole of the country. So that impacts, as you say, not just big corporates, but small, medium-sized agents as well. So yeah, great. Thanks very much, Mark. And we've all sort of touched on it there. And now we'll look at the positives slightly. We'll look at the new ways of working and what can come out of this from you guys in your respect. We've lost Charles. So we've lost Charles. So I'll wait for Charles to come back in. But we'll go to you, Sarah. I was coming to you anyway. And another report that I read, Sarah, was around the productivity loss on construction, and typically it's at around a 20% level. But Charles is back in, so I will invite him back into the screen. Oh no, I didn't. Bear with me 1 second. There's always a little technical hitch. Right, Charles should come back in soon. Yeah, Sarah, I was reading that productivity loss is now up to 35%, and that's a combination of social distancing measures, of even poor transfer of design information through the new technology, and also the materials lack of availability, that sort of thing. But in your world, in your construction, and what are your views on new ways of working in a positive sense for the construction industry and how it will make it more efficient?
I don't mean to be negative. I'm not sure at the moment we've got any positives as such, because we're more on the, I suppose, because we're on the domestic side of things, and we're more hands-on. So at the moment, I think we're going to possibly suffer a little bit more. I'm trying to think if there's any.
I mean, from a technology perspective, how are you?
I would say from our point of view, we were quite old school. We were still using a server, and we still needed our surveyor to work, and we still needed our sort of our bookkeeper, accounts lady to work, but remotely. So we've gone in cloud-based, and we did that within 2 days of lockdown, which was a huge help, and really, everybody's worked normally in that respect. The only thing we struggled with, our estimator went and worked remotely, but we found that you still need that little bit of interaction face to face. You almost overhearing conversations that are talked about, that sort of thing. So that's the one thing that I would say, possibly you still need that interface with people when you're looking at work and pricing it. Because one thing I would say is where sometimes assumptions are made, they're not discussed. You put a price in and you're too expensive. So that's one thing.
Yeah.
But I would say, like what Charles was saying about modular, that sort of thing, that's probably not part of what we do yet. It may be in years to come, and maybe what we do will change in that direction gradually.
And the process of that is building aspects of the project off-site and then transporting it in, right?
Yeah, because we have directly employed guys that are bricklayers, carpenters, that sort of thing. So we rely on them having the raw materials and putting them together from our company's point of view. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Thanks, Sarah. Well, we've got you back, Charles. Have we? You're back in. Yeah.
I hope so.
That's
Sorry, I don't know what happened.
no problem, Charles. So back to you, Charles, and again, you touched on it earlier with the modular construction angle. What positives are you seeing from this current situation and new ways of working in your line of work?
Well, as others have already touched on, I think we're all facing a new ways of working, and from my point of view, the reduced travelling, working at home and online is a huge positive. I always used to do a bit of working at home, but working permanently home is a slightly different issue, and I'm even learning now to do a bit of multitasking, because I can do a meeting and do something else on the other screen. So lots of positives out there, but I think we're very conscious as an organisation that it's not quite the same for everybody, particularly those who've got young children at home and perhaps those that live alone. So mental well-being and health is something that we're trying to increasingly get involved with and pay attention to.
And we'll go to Mark. Back to you, Mark, in the same question for you. In the commercial property world, what's a positive in terms of the ways of working that will come out of this to make perhaps processes more efficient and that sort of thing?
Well, firstly, I'd just agree with Charles and Sarah there in terms of the working. It works for some, doesn't work for everyone, as we're finding, with if you've got small children at home, especially at the moment with them not being able to go to school, and the mental well-being if you're on your own. And also, Sarah, I totally agree that there are times when if you've got a team and they're together, that they can work brilliantly from home, but it's just that interaction and picking up and knowing that, Fred or Frida has done X and it's very similar to you, and it's those snippets that you do miss working the way we're working. Having said that, in the commercial property world, there are certain things that certainly have taken off a little bit more than they were before.
Have we lost Mark now? we're losing them all one by one. Well, we'll wait for Mark to come back in. Oh, you're there, Mark?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're in.
Right. On the commercial property side, I was just going to say the traditional of having a shop front has gone, and the majority of commercial agents, certainly in our city, don't have a shop front. We also can use the internet so much better in social media, and I think certainly from a Gravestone and Pilcher perspective, and I don't think I'm speaking out of turn unless the fellow partners are on here. We were established in 1897. We are old established, we're old school. I think social media was a bit alien to some of the partners, but we have found great benefits in using the social media platform in promoting both our, what we do, but also properties. And you can now have virtual walkthroughs of the properties, which you couldn't do before. So whilst, like anything, it's better to see it in the flesh, you get a very good perspective and are able to do that all online. And at the same time, but like Charles is multitasking, you can speak to the agent whilst you're, walking through, so they can guide you through. So that has certainly been very promising. In terms of our property management side, we've adapted and the communication levels, I think, are far better than they ever were, rightly or wrongly, with the properties that we manage. And that's just been sort of, again, through technology and payment, the way you can pay and view on various platforms that we've put together your property. Certainly as a landlord, you can see what's there, what's income, etc., etc. And so it's all at a touch of a button. So they're the positives, most definitely. And I think they'll be welcomed and are being welcomed by clients and customers, as well as the staff themselves. But yes, it's certainly a little bit different out there.
Yeah, Mark, I'll pick out a question from the Q&A from James Turner at Creative Pod, who's asked, do you think commercial property will suffer long term as companies now see how easy it is to work from home and ultimately take advantage of the technology that you're speaking about there?
It's a brilliant question. If I had the crystal ball, we'd make billions from it, wouldn't we? I think what we are seeing is, certainly initially, I think the initial thoughts are, take offices, for example, will the office be the same moving forward? And I think probably the answer is it won't be. If you look around, certainly we look around what we've got, the amount of space you've got, do you need that amount of space? Can you have certain staff working remotely or on a rota system that we have at the present time? And then hot desking. Okay, we can't quite hot desk at the moment due to the rules in place. But I think certainly offices, you will not have the same amount of space and necessarily in the same locations as you have at the present time. And there was some research already done by Savills through a survey where occupiers were saying that probably they could lose 20 to 25% of the space that they've got, but they still want an office space because staff still want to come in, albeit they don't necessarily have to come in 5 days a week. So again, that helps reduce it. So I think from an office point of view, that will change. The high street, retail, hospitality, that's a very interesting one. We're already seeing here in Brighton, just the street scene is changing. So they've taken away car parking spaces throughout sort of the lanes area to allow for social distancing. But I think anyone who lives in Brighton and Hove probably knows or fears that if car parking spaces disappear, they're unlikely to reappear because that is the way that the council works. In certain areas, that might be a bad thing because it opens it up a little bit more continental. So you've got sort of areas where certainly with restaurants, cafes, they can, under the current new rules coming in place, be able to put tables and chairs out. It will produce more footfall. It will produce sort of a better ambience. So that certainly, may well be welcomed there. And I think in industrial and warehousing, I don't think that will change. We were talking actually on one of the tables I was on earlier, that is the sector that at the present time does not appear to have suffered. And we're getting more and more inquiries from our commercial agency department for those type of space, albeit at the lower end, sort of more, smaller businesses rather than the big corporates, because they've adapted during the terms of lockdown and they're doing more deliveries, they're doing, they need more space for storage. So that area has sort of held out, if you like. The other areas, I think it will change, but it's too early to say when and how it will change. But I don't think we'll go back to how it was in those particular sectors for quite a long time.
Yeah, I think particularly offices will just have to utilise their space given the social distancing measures, and we'll touch on that quickly with Sarah and Charles. Actually, we spoke about it before last week actually about the social distancing measures, and Sarah, you made the point about you're not going to have lots of different contractors on site, labourers moving around one another, and there will have to be a lot more of a regimented process to getting these people in and out of site. And as part of that survey around productivity losses, a big portion of that increase in that loss was around social distancing measures and people not being able to do things as efficiently as they were before. And is that something that you and the whole supply chain are really having to take into consideration, particularly when you're planning a project and delivery dates, that kind of thing? Is that something you're really now having to consider?
Yeah, well, we had it straight away when we were doing the Eastbourne Hospital job, because we were sharing welfare facilities in the hospital. So immediately we had to get an independent Oasis unit, which wasn't covered under our prelims, which is quite a considerable cost, so that the subcontractors felt secure and safe working on site, so they could wash their hands, could be isolated. So I think moving forward, that will be one thing that prelim costs will definitely go up with the consideration from that point of view. As regards to, I think they talked about possibly adapting the hours on site for people, so you could sort of maybe have shift working. I think that's going to be open to abuse by a lot of people because, for one reason or another, the construction industry is that way inclined, unfortunately. So I'm not sure whether that will be the answer. But I mean, for example, in our office, we've got one staircase that goes down to our kitchen and toilet facilities, and I think we're almost going to have an occupied engaged sign at the top of the stairs. So when one person goes down, nobody else can go. And it may be that sort of thing on site. You might have to have sort of have access ways wider, or you only have certain people working in certain areas, and you have clear routes marked through, that sort of thing. I think we're going to have to be quite innovative and creative about how we look at sites. New builds possibly not so much, but definitely refurbishments. If you're working in an existing building, you might well have to have some sort of you do fire plans at the moment, you may well have to do sort of like a bit of a plan for one-way working, that sort of thing.
And there's a big obligation and responsibility for you guys to set the precedence with that well, isn't it? It's because I think you even mentioned last week about people sharing the van on the way to work, which a lot of them do, and companies are now having to consider getting extra vans in, which they can't afford. So there's all these kinds of problems. And Charles, I'll bring you in on that topic and how you're having to consider that as well in your work at the stage that you go in at.
Yeah, we are a bit like Sarah's seeing lots of changes on construction sites. On bigger sites, I've got hand wash stations going in all over the place to make sure site operatives are safe. But from our perspective, we just our office is just not suitable. We are not going to be able to operate with any form of social distancing with all the staff in at the same time, because we're on the top floor of a building with several other tenants, and we can't get in and out. Particularly, we've got a call centre on the floor below with all these youngsters who have a horrible job, but they tear up and down the stairs en masse every hour to nip out for their fag break. It's quite difficult actually accessing our office. So we're going to have to think about rotas and how we go back in a safe manner. But a lot of what we do is going out and meeting people, going to construction sites, and giving contractors like Sarah a bit of a hard time over progress and program and what they're doing and why and what the risks are and all this sort of thing. But we can do all that online now, so it's fine. We will still have to go to site to value works and that kind of thing. And I personally also think it's quite nice, just to meet face to face and face to face from time to time and talk to people, look them in the eye. We will change our ways of working to suit the new world.
Absolutely. Thanks, Charles. Sarah, Claudia will be happy. The dog came in there. She was
just going to sit out there and bark, so I thought I'd placate her for a little while and then let her out. Sorry.
Absolutely fine, guys. We'll finish off with some questions from people here. We've got John from the accommodation company who asks, and this is probably one for Mark actually. The property market is currently seeing a minor boom with properties selling for asking price and over, and auctions selling 95% of their book. How long do you think that will last?
That's a very good question. I think we've decided that once lockdown had sort of finished and the market reopened up, there was going to be strong interest, and there were people pre-COVID that were interested in properties, those that were going to auction, those properties that were on the market, and they followed that through when they were allowed to, when we came back. It's a question of, will that last and will that see through? Is that just an initial sort of bubble, a bit like the high street opening and you seeing queues for Sports Direct and Primark, etc. on day one? Are they still there today? No. So I think if you look at it from an investment perspective and you're looking to invest in property, it is still a good market to invest in. There are still some good deals to be had. Rate of return is far better than having the money in the bank. So I think people will still invest, and I think that side of the market will probably remain steady. I think where you have the issues are where tenants are leaving or have left, certainly in the retail sector and hospitality sector, and the rents will change and you have void periods. That's going to be the problem. And how long will it take to for those to let, and where the interest is coming from? Certainly the interest is coming from the smaller, ironically, perhaps surprisingly, businesses, but not the major businesses. They are certainly not looking to expand. If anything, they're looking to shut and close branches and close down. So you've got to be careful where you buy and what you buy. On the residential market, again, it's very similar. The bubble is still there. It hasn't burst since we've all been allowed back in, or certainly the estate agents have been. But again, what new stock is coming to the market? If you look at Rightmove and Zoopla, quite a lot of properties that have been sat there that perhaps were considered the right price at that time, you now see the agents are reducing the price. So the market will always sell, because it will always sell at the right price. Is it the right price, though, for that investor, for that landlord, for the tenant? In terms of rents, it's also just worth just mentioning that the traditional market rents that everyone has been had, with rates per square foot, per square metre, etc., are still there. But we are seeing a lot of inquiries from especially retail tenants looking for rents for their turnover. So looking for turnover rents, which normally only occur in large shopping centres, not generally on the high street. So that's an interesting way forward, and it's one to keep an eye on.
That's good to know. Good to know. That could be another discussion point in itself. But thanks, Mark. Next question we got from Luke Bryce from Blue Line Security. Probably one for Sarah and Charles. I'll get your views on this. Between the two big hitters of 2020, Brexit and COVID, which do you see having the greatest effect on large-scale construction projects? Sarah, I'll ask you first.
I would say initially, definitely Brexit, because I think you're looking at materials coming from abroad, so it's delivery times, whether you can get it, costs will probably go up, and just general availability. I think we'll have quite a big impact. Workforce, again, already seeing quite a large number of people leaving the country. I mean, we don't notice it down here so much in Sussex, although I think Brighton have got quite a few large projects there that it may impact with them. But I think definitely sort of London area, I've heard there's lots of people leaving. So I think then we need to try and motivate the younger people coming through. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of getting young people, young women into construction industry. And I think we really have to look internally about how we promote that and fill the spaces that are there, management and also operatives, skilled or unskilled.
No, that's good. Thanks, Sarah. And Charles, same question to you. And I guess you could also perhaps share the views of the Constructing Excellence Association that you chair. What's out of the Brexit and COVID balance? Which one will have the biggest effect in your world?
Well, Sarah's quite right in that we don't need of Brexit on tariffs and material supplies, and we all know that the industry relies very heavily on particularly Eastern European labour. But I think we can see that coming, and we can, to some extent, we can start planning for that. My concern is more over COVID, because we just don't know what the economic impact of that is going to be, how long it's going to last for, and how it's all going to play out. So are we going to get a second spike? Are we going to go back into lockdown again? It's all a bit of an unknown. So I think that's of significant concern to whether you're an investor, whether you're a property owner, whether you're a contractor or a consultant. It's always sort of fear of the unknown that is more worrying. So that's That's my concern.
Absolutely. Great. We've probably got time for one more, and I see that Christian Roberts from Fidelity Energy's question has been voted up. So this one is: do you feel the industry as a whole will still look to drive the green, sustainable stance? And I guess to add to that question from Christian, I guess it's two ways to look at it. There's two ways to make money: is making money and saving money. So becoming more sustainable, becoming more green. Charles, we'll start with you, and we'll get the views of all three of you. Will the industry as a whole still look to drive the green, sustainable stance?
Yeah, I think it may almost be reluctantly, but the industry is being forced down the route of sustainability and green construction and energy saving and all the rest of it. And it's absolutely the right thing. We should be doing it. We should have started doing it. Well, we did start years ago, but we didn't really do it seriously, I don't think. I think some of the difficulties often that some of the sector, some of the investment in property is driven by private investors who want to build things at the rock bottom cost and then sell the building onto a tenant or a pension fund or somebody else. So they don't see the benefit in saving money in the long term. So therefore they don't want to invest in sustainable measures. But having said that, they will be forced to, because the building regulations keep changing, the planning conditions keep getting tighter. So we will be pushed down that route, even if we don't start doing it ourselves. So
great. And Sarah, we'll come to you from a construction perspective. Is that something that you're having to manage and keep at the forefront in terms of sustainability and being green?
Yeah, I mean, as a company, we try and be as green as we can as regards to vehicles and that sort of thing. And we are actually presently pricing a property for somebody in Hove, which is very green energy-wise, and the products they're using. So I agree with Charles. I think it is a journey that we're travelling on, and it will have to happen. We will just evolve, and we are more at the pointy end where we are told what to use. So I think gradually, as architects and designers are bringing these products in and responding to more probably domestic, from our point of view at the moment, their wishes, we will then respond to that and price it accordingly and carry out the work.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sarah. And Mark, lastly to you, and probably on behalf of a lot of your clients, I guess, is sustainability and being green something that it's at the forefront of what they're doing, the conversations that you're having?
Yes, it is actually, and it's very much at the forefront. And as a company, prior to COVID, we were starting to introduce green into our property management and be one of the first sort of firms, certainly down here, to try and we've got some clients, a couple of blocks of flats that are very keen to go down that line, and we're working with them to effectively turn their building into green, if one can do that. A lot of challenges ahead, and as Charles and Sarah have said, we are effectively, the industry is being forced down that route with the building regs and the planning, as they've said. There's also the EPCs that are in place and the minimum energy efficiency regulations, and they are changing and have been changing. So, for example, on a commercial building, if you're rated an F or a G, you can't re-let that building, you can't renew the lease on that building until the works are being undertaken to bring that rating up. Now that will change as well, and also from a valuation perspective, we were on a seminar the other week connected with that on sustainability and green, that if you're valuing a property that you know has an EPC close to the bottom line, and that EPC was done 5 to 8 years to 10 years ago, because they have a maximum life of 10 years, the building regulations when that was undertaken are totally different now than they were then. Therefore, if you reassess that property today, it is likely it would fail. So from that perspective, we need to be thinking sustainable and green on a daily basis when we're valuing properties as well. So I think it runs right the way through from Charles and Sarah's side of things, from putting the brick in the ground to us then managing that building and carrying out valuations, etc. on it.
Fantastic. Thanks, Mark. And we just lost. We heard you, but the connection just stopped your video, so we were able to hear you. But great, guys. Thanks. We've run out of time, and I'm conscious that everyone's here to get around the room and meet as many people as possible. So that's what we will do. So I will say thank you to each of you and take you off the screen now. But thanks very much for joining us. To let everyone know that Charles, Sarah, and Mark will be in the room if you do want to pick their brains or anything like that. But we'll now get back into the more open networking side of things. So thank you very much, Charles. Thanks, Sarah, and thank you, Mark. Thank you. Let me take the guys off screen. I'll see Sarah. Thank you. Great. Well, now we'll get back into more networking, and the way that